Welcome to input masks. What is an input mask, I hear you say? An input mask controls how anybody might type into a particular field in Access. So you're trying to control what comes in to therefore stop the amount of rubbish data that you might have in a system. Let's take our sample 2013 database and open up the employees table in design view. And we see, if I maximize and close the property sheet, that each of our fields that is a text field has the option for an input mask. Now the date time fields also have an option for an input mask, as do numeric fields, as do currency fields. So pretty much every data type has the option down here for an input mask. Now how do we add an input mask? Well, there are two methods really. One is to use the wizard, and the second is to learn the input mask codes yourself. So let's do the first option with the wizard. So if we want an input mask for the date of birth to force people to type the date of birth in a consistent manner, then we select the correct field. We come into the bottom section where it says input mask, click in. We're then free to type the input mask codes in if we know them, or at the end of that line there are three little dots. Those three little dots, if I click them, activate the input mask wizard. Now the first step before we get that far is to go past the security notice. Well, that's open. I quite trust the input mask wizard. I'm also prompted to save the table if I've made any changes recently. And then I'm in the input mask wizard. Now the wizard spots the data type of the field I'm in. So it sees that we're in a date time field and only gives me input mask options for the date times. So I've got a long time, short date, short time, or medium date. If I want people to type the date in this way, I can force them by choosing this as my mask and then clicking in the try it box to give it a go. So I must type in the format, the month, the day, and then a 4-digit year. When I go next, I then see the input mask code, which is here, 99/99/0000. We'll see what they actually mean shortly. But I could choose a placeholder character. Currently it's underscore, which isn't that obvious. I quite like the hash, because then when you try it, you get hashes where you should be typing. So I can then put the month, the day, the year. Next, the last step of the wizard just says you finished and finish. So then we have the input mask code, 99/99/0000, semicolon 0, semicolon hash. The hash being the placeholder character, so I could edit the code very quickly and change the placeholder character, perhaps the question mark. Now if I save the table and view, how that plays out is if I then want to type in a new date of birth. So let's start a new record, go along to the date of birth. There I'm in the date of birth column. Let's just scroll that along slightly. And as soon as I start typing, the masks pop up. So I replace them for question marks. Therefore I get question marks. 01/23/1965. And I go through and it's quite happy to take that. If I delete that and then try and type in a date that doesn't exist, 13/78/1965, then I get a little moan from Access to say this isn't an appropriate value. So let's delete that out. My little input mask characters remain. So it's to force people to type things in a particular format. Now there are a lot of controls for this forcing. Here we're controlling the fact that they have to type numbers. If I try and type letters, for example, nothing happens because the mask will not allow it. So I'm helping to safeguard some of the data entry. What other mask characters do we have? Well, let's escape this. So we cancel that record. Back in design, we can see the characters that are being used here, 9s, 0s, and slashes. If I open up our mask input table, which is a PDF file in your working folder, you can see what the individual characters mean. So 0 and the 9 are very early in the list. 0, the user must enter a digit 0 to 9. 9, user can enter a digit. So they can actually get away with not entering anything there. So on my date of birth, if I try to come down, new record, enter date of birth, and actually leave those empty, and just type in a year, then it has a complaint, but not about the input mask, by the fact that this is a date field requiring a proper date. So the input mask really needs a slight adjustment there. We should force them to type at least one character, which is what the zeros do. So it's 9090. Back at our little table here, the 0 means they have to type at least a digit. So that way they have to put at least 1. And then the 9 allows for when months don't have 2 digits and when days don't have 2 digits. But we are forcing them to type a 4-digit year because of the 4 zeros. So other characters in here that you can do is hash. User can enter a digit, a space, a plus or a minus sign. If it's skipped, access enters a blank space. L, user must enter a letter. Question mark, user can enter a letter. So by mixing your L's and your question marks, you can control what people are typing in, perhaps to zip codes or to state names. It's really down to what are you trying to control them to type in. I would have a little caveat of not to be too controlling with your input mask, because people will just put junk in to get through the input mask anyway. So you've got to balance up what's happening. Capital A, user must enter a letter or a digit. A, lowercase, user can enter a letter or a digit. Ampersand, user must enter a character or a space. Big C, user can enter characters or spaces. So these are sort of working in pairs. One of them forces them to enter whatever that particular character is for, and the other one says, well, they can enter that kind of character. Can't enter any other types. So here we've put a C, the user can enter characters or spaces, so they can't enter digits or plus or minus sign. We then have a number of separators for the 1,000 marks and date and time separators, so they're literal characters really. These two are clever masks. More than and less than converts all the characters to uppercase or all the characters to lowercase after it. So that way you're forcing people to type in the correct case, thus making your data nice and neat. But we will see later that even if you don't control how the characters arrive, so whether you're forcing everyone to go uppercase or all lowercase, then we can change that anyway when we output the data into a report. So controlling how it comes in might help with your consistency of presentation, but you can control it once it's in anyway as far as case goes. The exclamation mark causes the input mask to fill from the left to right instead of from right to left. Characters immediately following a backslash will be displayed literally. So if you want the actual character to appear in your entry, so not a space character that says you've got to put a number or a letter, you want the actual character to appear, then you can put a backslash. You may do that with email addresses, for example, where you must have an @ And then speech marks, anything enclosed in speech marks will be literally displayed in your mask. So potentially there's a lot to take in there of different masks that can be combined and work together. We've seen the date one in action using the 9s and the 0s. If we just wanted to force the surname to be in uppercase, we would simply go to the input mask more than. But as soon as you start using a mask, you then got to put the characters in to allow them to type. So they must put one character at least for a surname. So if I'm forcing a character, must enter a character, that's an L. But then after the L, they can enter anything they like. User can enter a letter. Well, no one's going to have numbers in their surname, are they? So we'll keep it to letters. And I need to put as many question marks as I think people are likely to want to type in. Now, because my field size is 50, I need to be putting in 49 question marks, just on the off chance that somebody actually has a surname that long. I've put in quite a few, probably enough for my data. So that more than is forcing uppercase, the L is forcing a character, and the question marks are any number of characters you like. Let's save the table, go back to view, start a new record. And now when I tab into the surname field, let's put Tom in the first name, into the surname field, I'm not going to use the caps lock at all, I'm just going to type a little s, and you can see it forces it into uppercase. And then after that, everything else stays in uppercase. So I've not done anything on the keyboard. I haven't put my caps lock on. I'm not holding down the shift key. I'm just typing the letters and they are being forced into uppercase. And then when I've typed enough, I tab through. So that way I'm getting the database to control the input. So all the characters in this particular case are stored in uppercase. And we do that by use of the input masks.